Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. It's time for the Q1 review of 2025. Firstly, I'm going to continue to be doing this series this year for 2025 because my goal for book reading this year is to read 45 books, which is pretty consistent with what I've done in the past, but last year I was able to surpass 50, so I figure if I set myself a goal of 45, then it's very likely that I will surpass 50, so that'll be my intention, and we'll see some of those books that are going to contribute to that here today. Number two, this is actually my first completely library loan only quarter. None of the books that I'm going to talk about in this video I have actually ever owned. So they have all come to me from the library either in audiobook, ebook, or a physical copy, which is pretty great. I'm very excited about that, although it does mean that I'm not making great progress on my TBR, my shelf here. But what can you do? Those books aren't going anywhere. And three, because we know that in the last few years I have taken this foray into romance novels when I feel like I need something that's not going to be as difficult for my brain to hurdle over as I'm reading it, and I can follow a formula and look for the changes to the formula and sort of know what to expect. Let's think of them as anxiety-quelling books. But because we know that I've been doing that for a while, what I'll do first is, instead of talking about these books chronologically, in order that I've read them across the month like I have in the past, what I'll do is talk about the non-romance books first, and I'll save a bunch of romance books for the end. So that you can kind of skip around if you like and just check out the sections of which you have interest, or watch the whole thing, up to you. I don't care what you do with your life. I do, but not in this video. So I have 5 authors with books I want to talk about for non-romance, and then 6 romance authors that I'll talk about today. So let's make a start. So I want to start off with the book that I've actually been the most excited to talk about, which is Say Hello to My Little Friend by Janine Capo-Crusett. This is the same author of Make Your Home Among Strangers, which is a book that I read with my library book club that I run here in March of 2020. And that was a meeting that we never actually got to have, because some of you may remember what happened at that point in all of our lives. As such, I was curious about what perhaps I could call into existence by reading another book of this author's again, and it turns out that nothing terrible on a global scale happened from me making that choice, but we did come out of that with an incredible conversation and this amazing book. This is a story of a young man in 2017 Miami 2017 for you Billy Joel fans out there, and he is a failed pit bull impersonator. Pitbull the musician, not Pitbull the dog. And he sees himself as not really being sure where he's going to go in life. He's 18 years old. He's just graduated from high school, and he says, you know what I could do? I could become a modern day Tony Montana. This book is not really a linear narrative. It switches back and forth between the main character, Izzy's perspective, and that of a giant whale at, the Miami Seaquarium is what it's called. And at its heart, this is a absolutely wild, zany, unbelievable, but also so understandable and remarkable tale about immigration, coming of age, and discovering who you are and what path you want to take. This is not what I would call a book for the faint of heart. You really have to sit down and focus. So many people in book club said, I really did not like this book at first, and I pushed myself to get through it, but boy, it paid off by the last 100 pages. And I think it is absolutely worth listening to the audiobook. I both read the physical copy and the audiobook, and it was a really great pairing. I don't even want to say anything more because this book is too unique and stands so much on its own that I don't want to give too much away. Please read this book if things that are out of the ordinary are your thing. Please, please, please read this book. The next book is called The Survivalists by Kanasha Kali, and this story surrounds a woman who is definitely burnt out as a millennial lawyer. She's an associate at a firm. She's trying to make her way up. She's trying to drive that corporate ladder as a Black woman in corporate New York society, and she hasn't had any luck with dating, and she has a whole formula plan for escaping bad dates. And so at the beginning of this book, it opens with her going on a date, and she winds up meeting a man with whom she then moves in. Not a spoiler, on the back of the book. It is the plot of the book. But her boyfriend's roommates are survivalist. They own a lot of guns. They have a bunker. They're preparing for the end of the world. And this book really surrounds her grappling with what she wants out of her own life, who she is willing to trust and who she's willing to believe, and whether or not she wants to make the choice to kind of climb this corporate ladder and continue striving for this thing that she has taught herself to want, or to go in a new direction and say maybe something else, like this guy's lifestyle, like his roommate's lifestyle, is worth a chance. And so she grapples with that. It gets into like a very richly deep internal monologue in this book that gave me some parallel feelings to Ottessa Moshfegh's My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and really wove together a lot of character traits and themes between the people in the story and things that, you know, a regular person who's not living in perhaps a house full of guns with a bunker, who have people in it that are constantly preparing for a doom and the end of the world going on, can relate to in everyday life. Folks at book club had a lot of differing things to say about it. I think the personalities, some of the characters really put people off, but at the end of the day, this is a neat exploration of what it means to change your mind about what you want. And then within there was a book that came off of my holds list, which was brand new. I have been reading the Lady of Letters series by Mary Winters for since it came out. This is the third in that series. It is a cozy mystery with the slowest possible burn ever of a romance that's happening kind of in the background of everything going on. But Lady Amesbury is a young lady, I think late 20s. She is a widow and her husband has died after only 2 years, or 2 months rather, I'm sorry, of them being married, and she winds up trying to figure out how to become a proper society lady alongside her Aunt Tabitha, with whom she has become family through this marriage, and she's turning her into like a proper society person. And yet these things keep happening around her or at her house, and she keeps having to solve these mysteries. And in this case, her younger sister from the country comes out to stay and needs to sort of run from a scandal that's happened to her out there. And so she's having her first season in London because, of course, it's the 18 teens. As you might imagine from the title, there's a murder in season during her first season. And it is a cute little caper of everyone kind of running about trying to solve the mystery. And these are just very well done, cozy mysteries, that great period of time that we all are familiar with because we're all now living in the world where Bridgerton has permeated the social consciousness. This one was interesting because I want there to be more books, because I like these two characters and I like their attitudes, and I like the fact that she's answering letters in this magazine as her kind of side job that nobody knows about, and I'd like to see more of that. But also, if the series were to end here, this gave a good final conclusion to the series. So I feel like Mary Winters has kind of left a door open for herself here with her publisher, and we'll all have to wait to see what happens. In February, I actually read both of the book club options, including the book that we did not choose for book club, and that was Oye by Melissa Magoyan, I believe is how you say her name, but my Spanish is not excellent, and for that I apologize. This book follows the senior year of high school for a teenage girl who is struggling with her family's acceptance of her sexuality and also her grandmother's health in the time of having to escape a hurricane. And that adventure that she goes on with her mother to outrun this hurricane definitely sparks a whole other situation with them needing to care for and about their grandmother Abue, who is the absolute matriarch of this family. She is the pinnacle, and her life story has been varied and wild and full of ups and downs, and she is the absolute definition of a strong woman. This book is told completely in one-sided phone conversations, so what you are reading is all of the main characters' dialogue to another person with some interjections, you know, of her recollection of what she is hearing the other people say, but it's not really like a transcript per se. It's mostly a one-sided transcript, which leads you to read these very long swaths of what the main character's thinking. I listened to this book instead of reading it in text, and I think that did me a disservice because it would have been easier for me to understand better if I had been able to see the words on the page. I think I did keep getting confused as to why I was hearing this one person talking at her sister on the phone, and then instead of just seeing where a pause would be and what the next thing the main character would say would be, I'm hearing these interjections of sort of her recounting what Abue has said to her instead. So it kind of brought me out of the narrative, and I had to do a little bit of mental gymnastics in order to follow along, where I don't think I would have needed to do that had the print been in front of me. But this book was very poignant. Other than that, it was poignant and thoughtful. Again, very strong coming of age novel. It is a family drama with the potential to surround a family tragedy, I suppose. And it's a lot about acceptance and acceptance on all sides of oneself, of others' choices, especially when others' choices are vastly different than ones that you might make. And picking apart the really close family dynamics that happen with extended family, especially when that extended family is living in the home. And finally, the last book in my non-romance section is The Mesmerist by Caroline Woods. This book is set in 1890s Minneapolis at a home for unwed mothers, at which a girl who goes by the name in this story of Faith appears, and many of the girls that are already living in the home believe that she is a mesmerist. And it is about her story and the story of another girl who is staying at the home, and the weird ways in which they get wrapped up in Minneapolis society and pretending to be other people and just tracking down their own heritage and the heritage of others, and never knowing what kind of stickiness might be at the end of any of those threads upon which they are pulling. This book certainly moved along. It was intense at points, hearing about what the girls went through and some of the characters that they came across that were less than savory. It was a nice mystery, I suppose, historical fiction mystery. You can still definitely see pictures of where the Sisters of Bethany home really would have been during that time period in Minneapolis if you do a quick internet search for that. So it's interesting to see what pieces of the real story and some of these real people that the author pulled from to create this narrative around them. And I think overall this was pretty much a 3, maybe 3.5 star historical fiction, historical kind of thrillery, I guess. I think at the library it was labeled a thriller, but I don't know that I would have felt that way entirely. I would recommend, if that is something that you're interested in, if you like a historical fiction novel, if you like some definite suspense and reading about the plight of young women and really looking back about how much has not changed and how much has changed since that time, this is certainly a book I would give a try. So across the first quarter, all of that reading was fairly diverse. Now, I began the year with the book that I actually started in the end of 2024, and that was Ruby Spencer's Whiskey Year by Rochelle Billow. This was recommended to me on Libby, not on my Kindle, on Libby, and this is about a woman who I think leaves her big time kind of like food blog, internet culinary, I think like Food 52-esque type of job, and just packs up and moves off to Scotland and finds someone to like sponsor her a visa a little bit on the sly, and she winds up in this place a little higher than Midlothian, if I'm remembering correctly, and discovers all of the town's secrets and winds up working at the mill and living in this weird little house. Anyway, she calls it her whiskey year because she just kind of wants to reconnect with herself and figure out what she's doing and write a cookbook. She's gotten a cookbook deal, so she's going to be writing her cookbook and essentially like taking a sabbatical out in the wilds of Scotland and drinking whiskey. So gap year for adults, I guess, is called a whiskey year. Now, I'm an American who has lived in Scotland, so when I pick up books about them, A, I'm interested and am happy to be there, happy to be along for the ride, and B, also reading with a little bit of a critical eye. Have I lived in all of Scotland? No, of course not. But there are things that I'm looking for, like how we're referring to people. How many times are we using the same relatively hackneyed Scottish phrases? And what is the cadence of some of these folks' speech that is coming out in dialogue? And is that true to what I have experienced myself? Ruby Spencer's Whiskey Year does okay. in all of these regards. It generally gets most of what I know from my experience there correct, or at least similar. But more to the point, I think my bigger issue with this book was the character just sticking her nose in where it didn't need to be stuck and pushing people to deal with past traumas, which were, at the end of the day, wild. just wild in the way that they wind up A, working themselves out, and then B, some of the conceits to make them feel worse in the contemporary timeline of the book. But she just didn't need to do that. She didn't need to get into all these people's lives. I honestly don't think that in reality, I guess that's why it's fiction, in reality these people would have been so open and forthcoming with her. So perhaps I was looking a little bit too much for reality in a book like this because I have my Scotland lenses on. But I don't know, this book was all right. There are certainly other selections in this romance section that I would recommend. But I'll tell you what they're not. They're not these 4 different works from Jen McKinley that I also read. Jen McKinley wrote Summer Reading as well as Love at First book, which are 2 that I read at the end of last year in December. You know, I liked these reasonably enough. I'll give the rest of her stuff a go and see where that takes me. Turns out I really don't like a novella. I managed to power my way through Royal Valentine, The Attraction, Distraction, and It Happened One Christmas Eve, all by this author, all of which kind of surround a couple people who are friends in this sort of museum of something, museum of manuscripts. I don't know, some made up New York City museum that has to do with like literary things. Each one of these stories talk about unbelievable. Some of them I feel like push the bounds of what is actually possible in real life. One probably is not going to get away with jumping into a sleigh and stealing it and flying off the bat. There's just so many things that were happening, and there was a lot of fainting, and to compress an entire romance, I think, into that short of a time span and also have alarming things happen, like almost dying on a billionaire's private island in a mad Hunger Games-esque like race to find some type of artifact. Too far from the bounds of reality for me. So I wasn't wild about any of these. And then I wound up getting Paris is Always a Good Idea. That's the name of the book. Let me tell you, I don't know that this book was a good idea for me, because keeping in the bounds of what is unrealistic, this book follows a woman who winds up going to Paris because her father is getting remarried to a woman that he barely knows and hasn't known for a very long time. And because her mother, I believe, died of a terminal illness, she is very upset that he has asked her to be in the wedding, or even just to be at the wedding, because she doesn't think he could possibly marry this person after such a short amount of time, and that it would also dishonor her mother's memory for him to get remarried. So she has a whole crisis of not having dealt with the trauma of her mother's passing, and so she winds up saying to her boss at work, you know, I think I need to take a break. He's totally down with her taking a break. She goes off to Paris, but the man that she's in an argument with at the office, they like butt heads all the time, and it's clearly obvious that they're probably going to wind up getting together. They're in a war with each other. This is very much an enemies to lovers situation. And so she leaves him regrettably in charge of the place while she just goes off to Paris, and she goes off to like reclaim the her of her college years and essentially attempt to hook up and rekindle the relationships with these 3 people she knew when she was backpacking across Europe in her early 20s. So she goes to Ireland, to Paris, and to Italy. And the things that happen in all of these places, again, are so far outside the bounds of reality, or even in some cases like common decency, social etiquette, or custom. I don't know, maybe I've been out of the city for too long. A lot of things going on in here. People getting into brawls outside her door, making friends with bartenders and bakery owners who will just drop everything at their very challenging jobs of owning bakeries and running bars to like gallivant across the city with her. I don't know, it didn't feel real. didn't feel real, and it didn't feel unreal enough in the way that unreal things happen in books that are meant to kind of sweep you away and make you forget about everything going on in your real life, can get away with. So please, if someone has read this book, please tell me what you think about it if you enjoy it. Because this to me was such a wild misadventure that I could not suspend my disbelief enough to really get into it. So it's great that I moved next to Naina Kumar's Say You'll Be Mine. And this is an interesting take on the arranged marriage in Indian culture. And so this one woman agrees to let her mother sort of take her through an arranged marriage and meet some men, and this other guy she's living in Texas and he's living in New York City or Connecticut or something. Either way, they're very far from each other, and the two of them wind up having a meeting and they agree to get married because it will both fulfill a need that they are needing to fill. And then they're like, you know what, if we hate it, we'll deal with it on the back end, and we'll either break up right before it happens and disappoint everybody and it'll be fine, or we'll just deal with it. So it's that type of situation. So I guess you could put it in the fake dating trope, but it's a little more intense than that. And this, I thought, had a very strong narrative, very strong motivations from the characters on both ends, and a solid amount of each of them doubting the other one's intentions without communicating their needs. And there are a lot of moments in this book where they do get together and like, hey, we should talk about this and communicate our needs and set some ground rules, and they do. And then there's just enough of their internal monologue of them doubting each other and not really feeling sure about how to proceed forward. So this, I think, is a really solid 3.5, maybe 4-star standalone novel on its own. If this type of tradition in marriage is something that you're interested in reading more about, I would definitely recommend this book. It is well written with likable characters and a cross-country plot, which involves a lot of airplane miles, which is, I guess, is one thing I would have wanted to know more about. Throughout this time, 2 of my holds in B.K. Borison's Lovelight Farms series came in. Those 2 were In the Weeds and Mixed Signals. In the Weeds follows the grumpy farmhand from the original book, which is set in the winter at Christmas. So I assume there are going to be 4 books in this series, 1 for every season. So they started with winter, the Christmas novel, and then one of the characters in there, I'm forgetting his name right now, but he is the grumpy farmhand who's part owner of this Christmas tree farm. And it is now spring, and this woman from a conference that he had a romantic interlude with at a conference has come into town, and she was mentioned in the first book, and this picks up with them trying to figure out what the heck they are going to do now that they are back in each other's lives, because they assumed they would never see each other again. And so they are trying to figure out the balance of her determining what she wants her life to be and maybe making different choices for her career, and needing to have the freedom to go away and come back and go away and come back, both in life and in her work, and him wanting to be at this farm with people who are consistently committed to him and committed to one thing always. So there is that clash, and they certainly get in the weeds with this. There's one moment in this book that very literally puts them in the weeds, which I did not find. It was a little far-fetched for me. Apparently this is the season of calling out the far-fetchedness in romance novels. Slippery slope to head down. There's just a moment where it's not certainly believable. And let me tell you, I live in a small town. I've lived in a small town. There are towns that are smaller, but there's a phone tree in this town, and I just don't know how a phone tree works in the advent of cell phones and texting, when it would be so much easier to have a text tree rather than a call-based phone tree. For those of you that don't know what a phone tree is, I would Google it. But the phone tree could be considered to be a character of its own in all of these, and that gets activated once again in a very ridiculous small town way, as it does in Mixed Signals, which focuses on Layla, who is a woman who consistently dates the wrong guy, and she winds up looking at this person who has walked in and out of her life for a long time in a whole new way. They definitely do the whole fake dating trope, and of course wind up figuring it out and making it work. This book takes place in the summer, and I am eagerly awaiting what the fall version of this is going to be, because I think it will probably bring this to a conclusion of relatively non-tangential main characters in the book. I've been really impressed with B.K. Borison. I think I started this series just because, surprise, surprise, it was recommended on Libby in some search I did that wasn't yielding what I was looking for, and I gave it a try because it was an elegantly designed cover, and discovered that the writing was nice and the story pulled you along. And the two last authors in this wintertime romance journey for me were Catherine Center, who wrote The Rom-Commers, which essentially is a love letter / justification of the rom-com. This is about a approaching middle-aged movie and TV writer who has given up her entire life and dream to take care of her ailing father, while her younger sister has been able to go off and go to college and start her career, and she's doing a very, very big self-sacrificing thing because she feels the weight of their mother's death, and I think there's a little bit of repentance and penance for what she believes was her hand in her mother's passing. As such, one of her friends, who is a hotshot agent out in Hollywood, gives her a call one day and is like, hey, you know that movie director and writer that you adore and everyone else adores? Yeah, he's writing a rom-com even though he's not a rom-com guy. And she says, that's hilarious, and tries to hang up. And then when he says, no, it's for real, but also his writing is terrible and I need you to help him, and he's totally agreed, she winds up figuring out a way to take the job, and in forced proximity with him over a duration of time, works to try to not only rewrite his movie to make it an actual rom-com, but also give him a crash course in what a rom-com film is supposed to be, because he clearly doesn't get it, has no idea, hates it, and needs to be convinced. And I wonder what could possibly happen along the way between the two of them. What I liked about this book was the slowness of its burn, was the ability of the author to imply their attraction without having to actually write anything that anyone would put a chili pepper next to or consider spicy, and also provide concrete evidence from existing cinema and television that back up all of her points about the reasons that we love rom-coms, the reasons that they have persisted in media today, and the reasons that this guy, Charlie, in the book, should bother giving them the time of day when all he seems to write is these big, impressive action-adventure hits. If I'm recalling correctly, winds up changing his mind. It was also really nice in the rom-commers to read the author's note, because this not only was her first foray into writing anything close to romance, but she also very much talks through why she did it, why she felt she needed to do it, and what her intentions are for writing in the future a little bit too. So once you read the book, definitely take the time and read the full author's note at the end. And last but finally not least, I read 3 books by Emily Henry. I know, late to the party. I know. In that time, I read Funny Story, Beach Read, and Happy Place. I think I wanted to start my journey with these when I finally gave in with the first one that she had written, and I just don't think it was available at the time. So I don't know what order I read these in. I'm not going to get into the plot of each of them because Emily Henry is so pervasively there in the romance genre. Anywhere that you find books on your favorite media, Emily Henry is probably there. I think of the 3 that I have read, Funny Story and Beach Read were probably the 2 that I enjoyed the most. The problem that I had with Happy Place is that there was almost too much going on and too many mentions of the town that they were in or the house that they were in being a character itself, and I was almost just pulled out of the story every single time when something like that got brought up, and how much they loved this place and how much they loved this house, and it's ending and everything is terrible, and there just felt like this compression of doom and gloom over what was supposed to be a story with relatively little doom and gloom that I couldn't get a handle on. Anyway, yes, Emily Henry, I get it now. I get what the hype is about. Totally understand. So there you have it. 19 books in the first 3 months of the year. I'm in the middle of 3 right now that have all been started and hopefully will all get finished, but time will only tell. Stay tuned, I think, for a more in-depth review of Say Hello to My Little Friend by Janine Capel-Crissette, because I would like to talk about the book in a more detailed way. But until then, thank you so much for watching. If there's anything that you want to know about us, please do look in the description. If you'd like to leave us a comment, let us know if you've read any of these. In the meantime, hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives, and we will see you very soon.